Today we're looking at the new White Dwarf mini Codex for the Silver Templars Space Marine chapter. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. So this month's White Dwarf has a few new Space Marine rules in it, and actually looks like it's going to be an expansion for the match play game, full of full rules to include a Silver Templars Successor chapter in a Space Marine army. For those that haven't heard of them, the Silver Templars are a new Primaris chapter, and they were basically the poster boys of the Warhammer Conquest magazine, the one that came out periodically in the UK and has gone to a few other countries now, and came with a bunch of Primaris models each week. In the background, they're accomplished melee duelists, coldly cutting a path to the enemy commanders before engaging and destroying them in single combat. In this little mini codex, they've got a chapter tactic. They're confirmed to be Ultramarine Successors, so they'll be using the Scions of Guilliman doctrine, and can use some of the other options from the Codex supplement Ultramarines. They've got 2 Relics, 3 Warlord Traits, and 2 Stratagems. In this video we'll just go through each of the rules and discuss the strength of them in game. So interestingly enough, the section begins with a little designer's note, saying that in the background the Silver Templars are only Primaris Marines. They don't have any of the normal size Space Marines, due to them being founded after the Primaris Space Marines were rolled out. They say it fits the fluff better to be able to field them as an all Primaris chapter. Though as far as I can tell, it's not actually forbidden rules-wise whatsoever. It does mean that if you feel that these chapter tactics fit your own fluff for your chapter well, or you want to access some of the fun rules, then you could field your non-Primaris army as Silver Templars should you wish to. The chapter tactic is quite an interesting one. It's called the Bond Marshal, and it comes in 2 parts. The first bit's a melee buff. If you're in melee and you roll a 6 to hit against any enemy infantry or bikes, then it automatically wounds the target. To be honest, it's not my favourite melee buff ever. It's very similar to what the Black Templars get from their unique assault doctrine, and it kind of has quite limited applications. There's a lot of stuff you're going to get in combat with that isn't infantry or bikes, such as monsters and vehicles for example, so it's going to be completely useless against them, and if you're already wounding anything on 3s or 2s, then it's really not that good either. Basically, this chapter tactic only really becomes strong when you're using it on low strength weapons, particularly Astartes chainswords spring to mind. If you're hitting a toughness 4 unit with a strength 4 weapon, then this will amount to around about a 25% increase in damage. It means infantry to infantry, they are actually going to be decently better in combat, and it does reward you for taking things like more chainswords in your army, things like assault intercessors, outriders, or maybe things like vanguard veterans if you did want to go in a non-Primaris direction. The second part of the chapter tactics is really quite powerful and universal. Every time a Silver Templars unit makes a shooting or combat attack, they can reroll 1 hit roll. It's kind of like half of the Salamanders rerolls or Master Artisans chapter tactic, and it's pretty good that it's so universal. Basically no matter where your units are on the board, they'll just be hitting just that little bit more accurately. This is going to be biggest reward when you're using just a few high strength shots, things like las cannons, or maybe thunder hammers in melee. And interestingly enough, because it's a reroll to hit, it means that you might be a bit more tempted to take lieutenants over captains in a Silver Templars army, as you don't get any reroll to wounds included in this, but you might be doubling up on hit rerolls. Say if you roll a 1 to hit, then you would have rerolled it anyway with the captain, but you might have already rerolled it anyway with the chapter tactic. Overall, I'd say the chapter tactic is fairly reasonable. I feel like the 2 different parts of it want to drive you in quite different directions though, and only really get used on the same unit in a few circumstances, say if you had like a bunch of assault intercessors with a Thunderhammer Sergeant or something. Next to note, they're confirmed Ultramarine Successors. This will mean they use the Scions of Guilliman doctrine for tactical marines. That's the one that allows you to move and shoot as if stationary, so it's going to be particularly potent with things like aggressor squads, or maybe Primaris intercessors with the standard bolt rifles, firing rapid fire shots at 30 inches even after moving. I think aggressors could definitely make a good appearance in a Silver Templars army, maybe chucking a squad of 3 of them in strategic reserve, turning up turn 2 to hose down the enemy with something like 60 bolt shots, and then hopefully making a charge to get those rerolls and extra auto wounds to bear. The way that successor chapters work, it means that you're basically going to be able to access the vast majority of the Ultramarines Codex. The only things that you don't get are some slight restrictions on the higher tier of relics that they can take. You don't get their actual chapter tactic because that's swapped out, and you're not able to access any of their unique special characters. There is plenty of other powerful good stuff in there, including the Seal of Oath relic, which allows mad rerolls against 1 target, the excellent Ultramarines redeployment stratagem that allows you to redeploy 3 units at the start of the game and can really put your opponent on the wrong foot, and you can pay a command point for squad doctrines to put say an aggressor squad into tactical doctrine turn 1 to give you all those bolt shots right from the get-go. I feel like they could compete with Ultramarines quite decently actually. I think their chapter tactic is perhaps a little bit more useful, and they do get a few interesting extra rules in terms of Warlord Traits, Relics and Stratagems, though giving up the special characters is a bit of a blow. Talking of their various other options, I generally think that their relics and stratagems are a little bit weak, but they do have a couple of really quite strong warlord traits. Relics wise, they've got the Armour of Zenaris. This is a Primaris only one, and it allows the bearer to treat AP-1 and AP-2 attacks as 0, and also shrug off mortal wounds on the roll of a 6+. It's not awful, though I think it's a little bit situational for me. I'd say it's likely to be best employed on a really tanky Space Marine character, maybe on that new captain from Indomitus with his Storm Shield. It would basically guarantee you saving on 2s against any low AP attacks, and still have you catching the AP-3 attacks or better on that Iron Halo save. Could potentially make him quite annoying to shift, but I don't think it's really much of a game-changing relic. I think there are stronger things available. The second one is the Banner of Echoes, which is an upgrade for a Primaris Ancient, and it basically makes your squad nearby a bit better in combat. Once per battle, you can trigger the ability in your command phase, and it lasts until your next command phase, and it gives you a 6-inch aura of +1 attack to Silver Templars Primaris core units. We're still waiting on the Codex to tell us exactly what a core unit is as opposed to a non-core unit, but I think it's safe to assume that basic squads and things like Intercessors and Aggressors will be able to benefit from this. It'll be interesting to see if it can affect vehicles or characters. In general, it's not bad. It's quite nice that you could affect multiple different squads, but again, I'm just not sure it's so good that I'd be wanting to take it as opposed to other options. It is only going to last for one turn, even if that turn's an important one, so I think in some games it could have a decent effect, or in some games it might have no effect whatsoever. Maybe it could be useful if you're building around it, maybe with a whole ton of Assault Intercessors or something. I do quite like some of their Warlord traits. The first one is Accomplished Duelists, and I honestly think it's one of the best Space Marine fighty Warlord traits that you can give a character. First of all, it allows him to always fight first, so if your opponent's charging you, I believe that shakes out so the opponent will be able to do their first charging unit, and then you'll be able to fight with your character. Could be pretty handy in being able to strike back before your opponent gets the opportunity to. The bit that really interests me is the second part of it though, which allows you to reroll all wound rolls in the first round of combat. Basically, if you charge the opponent, were charged, or made a heroic intervention. This one's actually really solid, as there's no other limitations other than that. You get them whether you're fighting infantry, vehicles, or characters. That could be very nice with something, say, like a Mastercrafted Power Fist on a Space Marine captain, or maybe a Thunderhammer on a Smash captain. Again, that will be going non-Primaris though, as captains already re-roll their hit rolls of 1. Getting access to full wound re-rolls is just such a powerful buff. Say if you did have a Primaris captain with a Mastercrafted Power Fist, which will be flat damage 3 as per the new Codex. If he's tangling with something like an Imperial Knight, he'd usually on average do about 6 wounds, this will put him up to about 9. It really is a huge buff both in terms of damage output and reliability. I believe you could also use the Ultramarine Stratagem to stack it with an additional Warlord trait. Maybe something like the Imperium Sword to give him +1 strength and +1 attack as well. You could make a very stacked Smash Captain with this, who's just going to obliterate anything he touches. Next we have another quite fun one called Precision Commander. You use this one in the command phase, and you nominate one unit within 6 inches of him. It can be any Silver Templars unit, it's not just core units this one, and each time they shoot and fight, they get to reroll 1 hit roll and 1 wound roll. For me, this one's just great to put on a buffing character, no matter who he is, whether he's a captain or lieutenant, or maybe even a chaplain or librarian. I'd sit him with some sort of powerful fire support unit that he's buffing, just deploy this on the biggest scariest unit each turn, and enjoy a few extra rerolls when you're shooting at the enemy. Honestly, I think a captain might not be the way to go with this one, as you're already now getting 2 free hit rerolls per turn, 1 from this ability, and 1 from the chapter tactic, which should have you covered for the majority of your missed hits, hopefully, if you're firing something without too many shots. I think this one could be really solid on a character buffing a Repulsor Executioner, or perhaps a squad of Hellblasters or Eradicators. Very solid Warlord trait, and I'd say it's well worth the 1 command point to buy it in, if you're not buying in something else. Finally, the last one is called Spiritual Synergy. This one's maybe not quite as powerful in my opinion. You nominate 1 weapon that your Warlord has, and each time you make a wound roll of 6 with that weapon, whether it's shooting or fighting, you get 1 mortal wound in addition to the rest of its damage. It's not a terrible close combat buff, but it's nowhere near as good as Accomplished Duelist. I guess it could be interesting to amp up the shooting of a gun with a lot of shots, but I think there's just better things to be spending your Warlord trait choice on. Finally, we have 2 stratagems. The first one is the Swordsman Strike for 1 command point, and this one's a potentially helpful one for killing characters. You have to use it on a Primaris core unit. Again, we're not 100% sure what core units are, but it will certainly include basic squads. And you just get +1 to hit rolls with any attack that targets a character. Despite its name, it can be either in ranged or melee, so if there is an enemy character exposed and you really want to put the maximal firepower out of that squad from it, then this one could be useful in certain circumstances. It gets a bit pricier in bigger squads though. Say if you have a squad of 6 or more, it will cost you 2 command points instead. I'm not sure this is one that I'd really build around all that much, but it could be one just that's nice to have in your back pocket, just in case the opportunity presents itself. Sometimes it will be useful, I think. The second one is called Claim Runes for 1 command point, and this one can be used on any Primaris unit in melee when it's in the engagement range of a unit that has more models than the unit you're selecting. You use it when the unit is selected to fight, it adds +1 to its strength characteristic and gets an extra AP -1. Space Marines do tend to be pretty elite, and they're often outnumbered, even by other certain elite armies, so again I can see this one coming in handy. Again, I think that this one synergizes very well with Assault Intercessors. Jumping from Strength 4 to Strength 5 will have you wounding Toughness 4 and 5 targets just that little bit better, and you could get some AP -2 chainswords on the go, which could be very nice. Combined with a chapter tactic, it's going to make them brutal against hordes and any other infantry squad that happens to outnumber you. I believe that as the rules are written at the moment, the AP -1 wouldn't stack with Assault Doctrine, as that one can't stack with anything else that improves AP, so it might be more one to be using in the first couple of turns of the game, rather than turn 4 or 5. In any case, again I'd say this is one that I wouldn't necessarily build around, but I just keep an eye out for situations where it might crop up and might be very helpful and powerful. So overall, I think this is really quite an interesting little index, and adds another fun way to play an Ultramarine Successor chapter. I honestly think that these guys do have the potential to be fairly strong, though whether or not they actually get taken in competitive play, compared with just playing Ultramarines or various other Successor chapter options, remains to be seen. For me, the biggest draws to them are those Warlord Traits, Accomplished Duelist and Precision Commander. The chapter tactic's fairly good, and certainly better than the Ultramarine one for certain situations, so perhaps if you wanted to play an Ultramarine Successor with a bit more of a melee slant, then these could be fun to run. In any case, I think it's really quite a well-written little index, adds some extra fun options, but nothing truly out there in terms of crazy strong balance-breaking stuff. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. It'll be really interesting to hear your ideas, particularly if you happen to be collecting an army of these yourself via Warhammer Conquest or whatever other reason. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where we'll certainly be covering the new Space Marine Codex as it comes out, or just check back for more 40k videos pretty much every day. If you have been enjoying my content, I'd just like to mention that the channel has a Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description below. The channel's Patreon is what allows me to keep on making all these Warhammer Tactics videos quite so regularly, so if you are enjoying a lot, any support is massively appreciated. Channel patrons get to see one video on the channel early each week, there's regular polls to see what sort of things come next, and you also get entered into the Auspex Tactics prize giveaway each month with a chance to win some big model kits. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.